Welcome back, 3Cs. We have one more type of graph that we have to learn, and we put it into its own separate lesson because there are a few little tricks that separate it from the other graphs and make it a little bit more tricky. So pay close attention. I'll make sure that we'll hopefully give you everything that you need to really understand these well. So the first reason why we separate into a separate lesson is because histograms, unlike the other graphs that we deal with continuous data. We talked about continuous data in the last lesson. We said discrete data is data that fits into specific categories like hair color or shoe size or things like that we can specifically lump into categories, and we don't need to worry about trying to figure out how they all fit together. With continuous data, it can be anything. So let's say something like your height can be anywhere between, let's say, 181 and 182 centimeters. It could be an exact height. So it's hard to lump it into categories. So the trick is that to do this, we have to make up our own categories. And I'll show you how that works in just a moment. To do that, let's do an example. So the following data set shows the value of purchase in dollars by 30 customers at a clothing store. Create a frequency table and histogram for the data sets. And what is the modal interval? So essentially for this, what we're going to do this, we need to make what we call a modal interval. Basically, it's an even number that we're going to go up by each time. So let's take a look at our data here. Our lowest one, let's take a look. Let's see, 14 is pretty low. $10 is pretty low. I'd say this is probably our lowest number here. $10.19. And then our highest one, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the ones over $100. 105, that's pretty high. $112, that looks like that's the highest there. So it goes anywhere between $10.19 and $112. So I think maybe breaking up into groups of $20 would be good. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the first category, anything over $0. Then we're going to break it off when we get to $20. Then 40, 60, 80, 100, and I think we don't have anything over 112, so that should do it for us. Now notice when we do these that they go up by the same amount. That's really important, otherwise our data is not going to look right. We want to have it be even intervals. It should be, in this case, we're going to go up by a modal interval of $20. Now, we also have to have a cutoff point, because if we just do 0 to 20, then if we have $20 right bang on, then how do we know which category it goes into? So to do that, we're going to go 1 penny less, and we're going to go to $19.99. We're going to go to, next one starts at 40, so it's going to be $39.99, $59.99, $79.99, $99.99, $119.99. Let me fix that. $119.99. And then what we're going to do is we are going to look at every single piece of data here, and we're going to fit into one of those categories. So let's start by erasing this just to help make this a little cleaner. I'm just going to put a little tick next to each one as we finish them. So 55, 40, that's going to fit into this the 40 to 59.99 category. This one's going to fit into the same category, so on and so forth. That's 28.31. That's going to go into 20 to 39.99 category. And you're going to repeat that process for every single one. If you want if you want to do the challenge for yourself, then feel free to pause right now and fill it in. But just to help speed this up, I'm going to go through and do all the numbers here, and that way we can continue on. 3, 1. And then lastly, the frequency, you're going to take each of those tallies and you're going to count them up. We have 3, then 9, then 8, then 5, then 3, and 2. So we've done our tally category. So we've done our tally and our frequency. So now we have all the data we need to start making our histogram. So you might want to keep that other page open just so we have it handy. So we said we're going to have our groups broke up into 20s. So we have 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and 120. A couple things to notice here. Just like usual, when we're drawing a graph, you always want to make sure that every new tick is an even number of squares away. So in this case, we're going up every 2 squares is an increase of 20. The other thing that you're going to notice as we do this, this is going to look very similar to bar graphs. But with bar graphs, usually we have a space in between. With these ones, we're going to have no space in between. We're going to have them lined up right next to each other because we want to see the shape of the data. Sometimes it can be useful, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now we need to figure out our y-axis, what we're going up by. I think our highest one was 9. So I think if we just go up by 1 every time, then that's fine. Or we can just skip up 2 and go by 2s. But one square for every single new number. Sorry, that should be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's what happens when I try and talk and do math at the same time. So look back at your frequency graph. We said for the 0 to 20 category, we had 3 prices in that category. So we're going to draw a bar for 3. For the 20 to 40 category, we had 9. So we're going to draw in 9. Again, I can't do it on my screen, but you should have a ruler while you're doing this to make sure everything is lining up straight. And then for the 40-60 category, if you look back at your chart, we had 8 in that category. So draw the bar up to 8. And then for 60-80, we had 5. And that's not very neat, so I'm going to go and fix that really quick. And then for 80 to 100, we had 3. And for 100 to 120, we had 2. Let's just double check that. 3, 9, 8, 5, 3, 2, 3, 9, 8, 5, 3, 2. So it all lines up. So lastly, to make sure that this is the best graph possible, we want to make sure we have some labels on this. So let's figure out a good title for this. Let's call it Value of Purchases. And label our axes. So these are price, and on the other side we have frequency. If you want to draw it sideways, you can. It's not really easy on my tablet, so I'm going to draw it on a bit of a diagonal. Either one is fine. And now we have a full histogram. So, as I mentioned, a couple things to watch out for. Make sure as you put your ticks on your axes that you are going up at the same amount every time, and that's all uniform and even, because that will make sure that the graph is easy to read, and when we're trying to analyze it, it's going to make it easier to work with. And also make sure that you draw with a ruler. I tried to do my best on the tablet, but if you're doing it on paper, then you should really do it just so it looks neat. One more thing I want to talk to you guys about with histograms. There's different types of distributions, the way that our information is organized on the graph. So in this one here, it looks like our highest point is kind of on the left. So it's going to fall into one of these distribution categories. In fact, it looks kind of like this left skewed one right here, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Now with these all represent different situations. So uniform distribution just means that all of our categories have roughly the same amount. They're not exactly the same, but they're kind of all in the same, roughly the same amount. So an example, let's say if we were talking about rolling a die, or rolling dice, If we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're all evenly likely to be rolled. So that could be an example of a uniform distribution that you might see. A normal bell distribution is one where we have kind of our peak right in the middle, and we have less to the left and right. And we call it a bell because it kind of forms the shape of a bell. And an example of this might be, let's say, the heights of a group of people. There might be a few people that are on the shorter side, a few people on the taller side. Most people are going to be right in the middle, usually speaking. A bimodal distribution is one where we have two different peaks. And a good example of this would be, let's say, if we looked at, let's say, when people are visiting a restaurant. So let's say one of these could be lunchtime, one of them could be dinner time. So restaurant customers could be an example of a bimodal distribution. And then we have what we said we had our prices that were left skewed and right skewed. Prices aren't always left skewed and right skewed. Let's say one that might be left skewed is household income. Usually, most of the people in society tend to earn on the lower side, and then the rich people in society tend to be a lot fewer of them, but they make a lot more money. So that would be an example of a left skew distribution. And then for right skew distribution, something like house prices might be a good example. Usually, let's say if you're looking in your neighborhood, there might be one or two really rundown houses that are not very expensive to buy, but then more of the houses that are in your neighborhood are going to be on the more expensive side, and they're trying to list them for more. So that would be an example of a right skew distribution. So hopefully that all makes sense. If not, then shoot me an email or check in with me and we'll get it all figured out. Try some practice problems, and I'll see you in the next lesson.